Hi there, Randy Green here. It is May 24th, and this is Pentecost, technically on the second day. Not that I'm going to go into that one. I just want to, I've got a lot of thought processes going on, and to load off some of them by verbalizing them, I'm hereby making this little video where I will touch some of the thought processes that are going on in my mind right now, and you can do with them whatever. Use them as inspiration to kind of ponder upon things that will get you into a very productive type of contemplation, where you can meditate upon some of the questions I'm asking here, as well as see where these processes will take you. Because at the end of the day, the way that you are going to alter the content of the code sheets by merging them with mental energies is what will develop and purify these code sheets so that they can begin to reactivate in their original sequences and in the correct order of things that are in alignment with your original buildup of your template. And what I'm here insinuating is technically that some of the tampering that's been done with our template is that it has been disorganized. So the code sheets are, they have got a lot of viruses in them, to put it that way. There's a lot of artificial programs that are coming in the code sheets, and the only way you can kind of work your way through these and find the viruses in your code sheets, again using a computer program analogy, is to literally work with the program and work with your code sheets and go into the thought processes and see where you get scrambled, where do you fall asleep, when do you get tired, where do you spin off, where are you kind of derailed in a different direction. When you are contemplating on something, what comes in the way if you are contemplating on, let me use this one because this is some of the things that I have mentioned it, and if you read through the Bailey books I have recommended for you, these 5 books, you will get enough of the little here and there information she gives about Christ and the Master Jesus, which are 2 complete entities that are 2 different humans. Christ is technically a Syrian, one of the Grand Masters of the Great White Brotherhood, and he's from Sirius. And then you have Master Jesus, who is from Mars and who is part of our human civilization as it is after the, what they don't talk about the hijacking. So we will assume that the current type of humanity that we are having now, whatever that means, and however they are interpreting this, they don't talk about the hijacking. But I want you to contemplate on a thing here that is, in the Source of Humanity, I talk about vertical integration processes as well as overshadowing, and Bailey talks about overshadowing as well. And for us today, it might not be a big thing, but here you have to put it back into the correct context. This material was written 100 years ago in the 1930s. Let's set the scene for this material. It was written around 1930, 1940, and ending in 49, where Alice A. Bailey died. So with that understanding, we are here having a completely different culture. Humans remember the sciences at the time. This is where we kind of began with really nailing the electromagnetic forces. We had Einstein, who had come up with the relativity ideas. We had the beginning in the 40s and 50s. Not in the 40s, we had the wars there, so there was not much science going on. But in the 50s, the beginning of what we understand as quantum sciences really began to kick in. It had already begun before the wars, but everything was halted because of the wars and the Great Depression and the Spanish flu and these kind of things that were going on. And then it kind of got picked up afterwards in the 50s. We also had the whole Oppenheimer understanding of how to use atomic fusion, creating the atom bomb, and how to splice atoms, and all these kind of things were in the making. So that was the setting that we're in the middle of. And at the same time, we still had a strong church. We still had a strong religious belief system based upon the ideology of the church, the Christian church. The world was divided in a different way. Go back and look up a little bit of history, what actually led to the First World War and what came after the First World War, and that the whole kind of a lot of old empires fell after the First World War and new sprung to life, similar as we had after the Second World War, where, for instance, we had what we call Israel. The state Israel was created as in kind of being granted to the Jews by I think it was United Nations, but I also think America had a lot of say in this because America was part of whatever was going on in Europe at that time. So again, this whole kind of had the Axis powers that were kind of deciding things on behalf of common man, and the political system was different. Churchill, all of these kind of Eisenhower, all of these kind of things were there. So this is the context you have to think this into. And we had not had the big 1952 UFO sightings over Washington yet. That was in 1952. Bailey ended in 1949. So the whole build-up of what was to come is part of this context. And in that context, you are to contemplate on the very fact that she talks about the character Jesus, which was a man who was trained in amongst the red robes on Mars. He came to our planet, embedded himself into the Davidian or the lineage of David amongst the Jews for reasons and purposes. When I read the Bailey material, the whole reason why that happens and how she views the Jews and the Zionites and all of these political things that comes out here and there in the Bailey books, I'm not really, that's a political point of view that 100-year-old, and I have made my versions of this in the book, The Source of Humanity. So I'm not going into the political version of whatever. The Tibetan in that manner is quite harsh, which is kind of contradicting the whole understanding that we are to be brothers and sisters. But it is, again, the brotherhood thinking is something that we are building and moving towards. It's not represented 100 years ago. So we also have to take that into consideration. And there are things to be honest about, but it's always a point of view. It's always when we go into political understanding of things and how we see different nations and what their karma is and what their purpose is and why they have been created and all these kind of things. It depends on what faction you are talking to. They will always see their country or wherever they come from or whatever they are dealing with as something that is in this or that or whatever direction. This is a matter of interpretation. So I don't want to touch that one. Those of you who might remember or have heard it before, when I was a very young girl, 14 and 15, I was extremely political, active. I was part of whatever demonstration you could come up with that involved a better school system or human rights or peace movement or against atom weaponry or whatever it was. I was out there studying and trying to understand the political background of these movements and what was going on. And very quickly in an early age, around 15, 16, I realized that this was very, very emotionally driven and had very little to do with actual politics, as in for the highest good of the many, so to speak. It was all about personal investment and personal achievements and personal power, and had very little to do with solutions that actually were beneficial for the majority of the humans on our planet. So it was separatistic in its and self-oriented in its way that kind of I lost interest in the type of politics that are driven on this planet. But it taught me a lot of good background information, which of course has come in very, very neatly and very in hand, has become handy for me when I've been dealing with the other levels of our reality and with understanding the other races that are here. Well, then the human politics kind of fits in because they are an extension of the races that are present here. So that kind of fits in, and you say, oh, yeah, I get that one, of course, clearly. But let's go back to the contemplation part. The whole understanding is that Christ, the understanding of Christ, and the person that is seen as Christ in the beta material is a Syrian. So that is an extraterrestrial. Let's just use the expression as it is. Christ is an extraterrestrial, and I'm not doing the whole kind of extraterrestrial as a gray or anything, because the Syrians are human looking, but they are a different species. They are humanoids. And then you have Jesus, the Master Jesus, which in my point of view, and as far as I recall, is a true human. So you have this combination of an organic vessel that are doing the incarnation into this planetary system, into a lineage of a specific group of humans that are what we call of the Davidian lineage, which is a royalty lineage that technically goes back to Chaldea or to Sumer or Sumeria. So this is not what we call a specific Jewish lineage. On the contrary, it is actually what we could call a Baal lineage. And this is important to understand these little differences, so that when we get the whole kind of, oh yeah, Jesus was crucified by the Jews, well, perhaps that Jewish lineage, the ones that were actively participating in the area we call Jerusalem, they might have been Baals or Niburians, and actually not Jews, the original Jewish lineages that came from Egypt. So again, when we do the whole understanding of the Jewish lineages, you have the original ones that comes from Abraham, that came from Ur in Chaldea, that is Baal lineages. And then you have the other group that came from Moshe or from the Egyptian Pharaoh lineages. Two completely different lineages, of which is part of that whole hornet's nest of political implications that were actually going on at the time of where scientists wants to place the event line of the person or the teacher Jesus, as we understand it, the one that got hung on a tree and were executed by the Romans. So in that context, this makes it different, because then you suddenly have a Niburian Syrian combination going on there, and that's something entirely else. And I just want you to contemplate on that one, contemplate on the matter of the fact is that Jesus, or I call him Joshua because that's the name I understand him under, did Joshua actually incarnate in what we call a Jewish lineage or a Baal lineage? Question number one. Question number two, which is also put into, I think it is part of the book, the Cosmic on Cosmic Fire. I can't remember, it doesn't matter. But these are the little information bits that are given here and there, because whenever Bailey talks about Christ, it's always in short sentences here and there, and you have to connect the dots yourself. She mentions that the Master Jesus were also the same person that incarnated as Joshua as part of the Pharaoh lineage, as part as Moses' brother. So, and this is both Aaron as well as Joshua, and these are two later understandings of it. You have first Aaron, and then you later on has Joshua. So this is, I can't remember where Joshua fits in that one, because it's the same, for me, it's the same personality. When you talk about Aaron, that is Moses' brother, or you talk about Joshua, that is who I see as the person Jesus. Well, for me, that's the same person. So that makes perfect sense to me that he should be the reincarnation of Aaron that were part of the whole exodus of Egypt. So this is important to understand as well, because if we have the person that originally incarnated in Aaron, and he had the staff that were able to turn into snake, and he was the one that technically did the teaching or the explanations and the talking that were that allowed the Ivrites to, or the Hebrews, to leave as enslaved people leaving Mitzrayim under the Pharaoh lineages, whatever that means. It's also important to understand this one. They're not calling it Egypt. That's a later translation. In Hebrew, it's called Mitzrayim. And this has understandings as well, because why are they calling it Mitzrayim and not by its name, which I can't remember what is in Hebrew or modern Hebrew. But just so you understand this makes us a little bit kind of in a different land that is what we could call imbued still with the fourth dimension. This is how I keep interpreting that thing. And we also understand that Moses was perhaps giving the tablets on the mountain Horeb. There's a little bit of, is it Horeb or is it this in Sinai or whatever it is? A little bit. It was in the wilderness. We can say that for a certainty. And he said that he did not have the lips cut for that kind of talk that would give them the ability to regain the strength and do the trialing and do the opposition towards Pharaoh and his priesthood, which is what Aaron stands up against. He stands up against the priesthood of Egypt as they are doing magical things. It's a contest on magic, and Aaron is throwing his staff to the ground and it turns into a snake, and then he picks it back up and it turns into a staff again. And that is where he shows his superiority by having that type of magic that allows his staff to become a snake. It is better magic than what the priesthood of the Pharaoh is presenting. So this is how they get out, more or less. There are also the 10 plagues and all these kind of things, but this is one of the contest situations that we are having that is kind of giving a test of strength between the two type of priests. Aaron is the first priest of what we call the Moshe lineage, and the ones that technically became the originals of the Levi priesthood, that were the ones that grew out of the Exodus. Whereas if you are having the whole idea that he's then reborn under the Davidian lineages, which goes back to King David, that goes with Solomon, that goes with the Ur in Chaldea, that kind of goes with the Magus there, you also have some kind of magic involvement, some kind of understanding of, well, what was he actually fighting when he was to be incarnated amongst the Jews in Jerusalem, and at that time under Roman superiority. Because who were the Romans? These were the scavenger lizard overlord races, and they had gained the entire, they had all the way up to Britain. They were in complete control of the entire Mediterranean area and a lot of further up north. So they were quite powerful at the time, including into Egypt and all the way down there. So these are some of the backgrounds that we have to take into consideration as well. And why am I pointing this one out? Because when the more you read into the Balaam material, you kind of get this understanding that there is this political incentive to try and develop humanity, but it goes with the three different groups that the White Brotherhood seeded amongst our humanity or our civilization on our planet, if we go with their account. And this does, even though they talk about that it involves humanity, we now know that it doesn't, because this is under the White Brotherhood. These are their projects and what they seeded, and they chose to seed in different root races, their root races, and they did it in three different groups. The ones with a huge amount of genetics from the White Brotherhood seeding, as well as the ones in the middle group that had a little bit less, and the ones that technically had nothing. So this is also important. And the one that is in top of the White Brotherhood is this great Syrian that we call Christ. But Christ is not the same as Sanat Kumara, because Sanat Kumara comes from Venus. So this is something else. Again, let us put it into the context for us today. It's kind of, so normal, but 100 years ago, and I simply can't, one of the things I can't grasp is why people have not talked much more about this in the different communities. Whenever I read books in Danish from the ones that were part of the Bailey groups here in Denmark and whatever, it's like it's there, but they don't really grasp the implications of it. And that's why I feel the need to stress it out, so you're not overlooking the implications of it, because this is a puzzle. The puzzle is you have to go with the Christ figure. Christ just means the anointed one. And if we go with that, Christ is this grand Syrian that has no name for reasons and purposes, from the White Brotherhood, and the White Brotherhood is positioned in the Sirius system. I will know a little bit more. The whole teachers on cosmic fire goes into these alliances between the different, or the triangles between the different planetary systems and what they're trying to achieve, which also goes hand in hand with the initiation process, that also go hand in hand with the different planetary schools that are in our solar system, which are all under what we call the solar logos. But the solar logos is not really discussed much about what that actually is. There's a lot about the planetary logos. That's a whole third entity, our planetary logos. So you have our planetary logos, that is one of the masters that have chosen the path of becoming a planetary logos and have made arrangements with the Great White Brotherhood as well as the Venusians to do a specific type of upgrading work within our solar system on our planet, and that should be part of the great plan for the solar logos. And this is where I come in and say, okay, who and what is the solar logos? That is not really mentioned, but that's the top governance in our solar system. That is the solar logos, our sun. And for me, that sun, whenever I look at the sun and whenever I look at what the sun is, that's a female energy because it's life-giving. So that is per se feminine. So that's interesting, just to put it that way. And if you do Bailey material, she says or the Tibetan says through Bailey, because she's technically just his secretary. It's written down that the previous solar system was feminine in the understanding that it has composed everything that we are now part of. But at the same time, we have the planetary logos, that is in him we are existing, because that is his project. Our planet is his project, and how he has arranged the energies of the previous solar system. So he is the director of our planet, to put it in a different terminology that makes it less divine. So let us just say, okay, let us put a different word than divine and call it cosmic, so we get rid of the whole divinity, God, spirit, old language, and get it into a little bit more updated version. So we are talking about the original life force that goes with consciousness and energy, as I've been trying to develop the language. And that is within a context of a planet that is under the directive of a planetary logos, who is technically a CEO of our planet, and he is the one that is deciding what to do. But he is part of the planetary hierarchy, which are a group of extraterrestrials that are working with the Sirius system, that are working with the Venusians, that are also a different group of alien races that are not humans as we understand them, since they are in the fifth cycle and are therefore further ahead of us, of which we have Sanat Kumara. And why is he called Sanat Kumara? To understand that one, we have to go back if we go with the Blavatsky material, and she created the root races. You can look that up on Wikipedia, and we can always discuss whether or not she was correct in what she saw the root races as. But as always, there's a lot of noise, and then there's something that's important. And what is important is that the first root race of the main root race of, technically you have 7 main root races, and we have already played out the previous four, where you have the Polarians as the first root race, you then have the Hyperboreans as the second root race, and you have the third root race, which were the Lemurians, and then you had the Atlanteans, that was the fourth root race, and then the fifth root race, which we are part of, are the Aryans, and we can always discuss whether or not we like that terminology or not, but the Aryans, their first sub-race of the fifth root race were the Hindus. So that explains a lot about why that terminology has been used. And then there's all the other sub-races, and this is, of course, within the classification system of Blavatsky. And we can always discuss who and what Blavatsky actually was. And I will say pretty much, I think she is one of the old from the lineages of Atlantis, and we can always discuss whether or not she was actually which side of the fence she was talking from. So we'll just shelve that one and not go further into that. But there are important things to be put into that context. So I'm touching ground with a lot of thoughts I've been doing lately, including when you do the Wikipedia reading on the root races, you will also see that there was this idea, Blavatsky prophesied that the sixth sub-race of the fifth root race would be born in California. And I think that information makes so much sense to me, and that this sixth root race would be born in the first 10 years or so of in the beginning of the 21st century. That means in the 2000s. And it would be in California, and it would be from Anglo-Canadians, Anglo-Australians, Anglo-Americans, and Anglo whatever, kind of all sorts of white races, right? But this involves Canada, Australia, England, as well as America. And whenever I've looked at the military projects and what was created there and the attempt to create this new type of humans, which I think they looked to Blavatsky and probably did the Atlantean attempt to try and hijack that sub-race, which I think that's what the military projects is all about. Well, it puts a lot of things into place for me, as in kind of perhaps that sub-race were not naturally born because it was hijacked already back in 1959 when the military projects technically began with the Nazis. And the Nazis, that group, were part of the one that calls themselves the Aryan Shivas, which are some of the ones I encountered in the New Order of the Ages, Noah. So this is all about that you have this prophecy that there will come this new sub-race that would be the sixth sub-race of the fifth main root race, and that would be seated in the beginning of the 21st century, and that would be located in what we call the Western world. And that root race are the ones that are supposed to carry that signature that will call in that type of energy that will allow the great Syrian to be reincarnated, to come back, the second coming. So now we're beginning to have a lot of pieces of the puzzle that suddenly falls into place. And we need to see the Balaam material in that context as well. Were they preparing the grounds for this material that would allow this great Syrian to overshadow his prospects of whoever was part of that sub-race, the sixth root race? Because when you read about the root races, you will see, for instance, the ones that did not go under with Atlantis. There was one progenitor, notice this word, one progenitor that laid the grounds for the new races that were created after the fall of Atlantis. One progenitor, and this progenitor goes again back to Hindu teaching systems, that goes with the understanding of a Manu, and that is the old father for an entire human species, similar as Abraham was the Manu of what later became the people that we now call Christians, or in the older, in 2,000 years ago, Christians and Jews and sorry about that, Muslims. So this is again the type of religion that defined groups of people. But now we are having a shift in this, and this is where I want you to contemplate on another piece of information that's interesting. Because when we talk about the coming of Christ, the great Syrian that is coming back, he's not coming back as one person. There is the possibility, if this subrace of the fifth root race, the sixth subrace of the fifth root race, will be able to carry his signature in their heart in a way so that he can create the foundation from where he can create an organic vessel. And as things are now, I don't think it is, it could be completely false information I have gotten. Let's just say I might have some personal experiences that would go in the opposite direction of an actual reincarnation of him being born in physical form, let's put it that way, because the energies are simply not high enough. This six sub-rays have not lifted the energies enough. This was the whole, when you remember back in the 2000s, earlier in the 80s and the 90s and the beginning of the 2000s, you had this whole kind of the crystal children, all of the indigo children, and all of these kind of things. And these are the ones that now have become the grown-ups of the military project. And we can see where the world is today. And I don't think, unless we do a complete polarity, we go with the complete dark Syrian forces, and then the great white brotherhood Syrian can come in as a kind of, when you have this what do you call it? Complementary systems, that's what I wanted to go with, that it's the complete opposite. Well, then that is possible. I'm not ruling anything out, because I'm not part of the Great White Brotherhood, and I don't know what their great plan is. I'm just trying to ask some critical questions that will get us into some thought process that could be productive for us. And what I also want to put in there is, in the Bailey materials, you mentioned somewhere, I think it is in the book, The Race and the Initiations. I'm pretty sure it is in that one, but it could also be in Education in a New Age, or it could be part of no, it's one of these two books, because these are the ones I've been looking in lately. I'm reading my way through the different material. So there she mentions that if Christ does come back, the second coming, he could choose to come in a human form within different aspects of our reality. He could actually, when we typically talk about in the Christian belief system at the second coming of Christ, it is always within the church understanding, as him being reborn as a church figure. But she's actually suggesting that he might come within business, or he might come within the financial system, or he might come within psychology. So this is again opening up a palette of, or a fan of, different aspects of things that kind of pushes us out of our conceptualized understanding of what the second coming is and what that actually could mean and what it actually implies. And it implies that there are people that are ready to receive him, so to speak, receive his grace, create the foundation so that he can either overshadow them through the signature in their heart, which is the second ray symbol, from where he can connect his consciousness and through the hearts of the people that have been developed through the different initiation using the staff of Sanat Kumara, which is all about upgrading of the human energy field so it can become an energetic transmitter of the light of the hierarchy, to put it in that wording. And if that is possible, then the hierarchy can be externalized. And if it is externalized as becoming part of our outer physical world and not being situated in the fourth cosmic ether on some lower cosmic ethereal plane in our reality, quote unquote, probably the fifth dimension, well, then he, because the Syrians are in the fifth dimension, then he would actually be able not only to overshadow these people and function through their heart, which is what I think if it happens, that is what will come, also including some of the experiences I've had and what I have seen. My best guess is that that is what is going to happen. So it's going to be a mass overshadowing and not one single human that will come in his Syrian form, or in again incarnating through some lineage or some human or whatever it is, because he overshadowed Joshua, right? He didn't come himself, he was overshadowing Joshua, and that's why Joshua got crucified but via the crucifixion he did some initiation that released him off our planetary system, which is why he's now focusing and his energies and whatever he's doing back on Mars and not part of this system anymore. He paid his dues, so to speak. But when we finish off with the Master Joshua or Jesus, is that he is still from Mars. He's still working with his karma of where he went wrong when he did whatever he did here, which is kind of going a little bit against, well, he did do his initiations, right? But he still has karma here. So, and I would say, well, the karma is probably the work he didn't get finished because he got taken out before he actually completed what he came here to do. And he is still having the church under his control, so to speak. And in my understanding, the church are all about Baals. So for me, it makes perfect sense that he incarnated in a Baal lineage and not a Jewish lineage, which is why it is now the Christian church and not the Jewish church. So we can also say, well, is it then the fault of the Jews that he was executed? Again, asking some important questions that would change world history if we know the true story of who actually crucified him. Well, we know it was the scavengers and the overlords, but what was that about? Was that an internal strife between the Niburians and the scavengers from different systems? Was it, where did it go back to? What was the conflict actually about? What was the Great Syrian actually supposed to accomplish? What was the function of Joshua in our system? What was he supposed to accomplish? We can't take into account what's being put into the Gospels. What was the plan? If the Great Syrian, either through overshadowing or by actually second coming, if that Great Syrian chooses to do it within the monetary system or within business, that kind of, I'm just saying that kind of puts the whole, everything in a different context. It just messes, I can feel the whole cognitive dissonance when I'm thinking, okay, whenever you're having the second coming of Christ, you're always thinking about the whole Joshua, he's the one that is coming back. He's not. It's not him that's coming back. It's Christ or the Great Syrian that will incarnate. So what does that mean? That would mean that the Great White Brotherhood would have a direct representative from the Syrian system of the solar riches within our planetary system. And I don't think that whoever's controlling our reality will allow that. Just putting it out there for further meditation. So that's one of the great processes I've been going through and having tried here to put it in order by explaining some of the different thought processes I'm working with and trying to piece together. Not that it matters much, because I'm just giving something energy that is technically completely over with, and I don't believe in the second coming, and I don't have this whole urge for a great white brotherhood Syrian to come in and incarnate in human form, whatever that would mean. And it would not make the big difference for me, because as I said, the whole Great White Brotherhood series, whatever affiliations they have for our system, is not where I have my the humanoids are not my area of expertise, so to speak. But I find it interesting, because when I say I don't do Christ consciousness, all consider I have a bachelor in theology and I studied the Bible for fucking 4 years and wrote a dissertation in it and all these kind of things. Well, then the understanding of putting it into that this is about to put it that way, extraterrestrials, which makes sense as well when we go, again, I'm just spinning off a little bit here, but we have the church that is actually saying, well, there probably is extraterrestrials, but your whole church is founded on extraterrestrial life forms, right? So go figure. And then you shred apart the entire understanding of what Christianity actually is and beginning to put it back into its correct context, whatever that is. And that is part of the unraveling work. So that's why I don't believe in Christ consciousness. So if we are to put it into its correct context, it would be called Syrian consciousness. And then add in those of you who made a template reading to begin with, and you got that one where I talked about that the brain in humans are highly infused with Syrian genetics, and then put it into bioregenesis programs, put it into human projects, put it under different alien races that have been here. Combine it with the Alex Collier video at the ranch, which is a 4-hour-long lecture, but it's a good one, where the Andromedans, not from the galaxy, but from the constellation Andromeda, blue-skinned, means Syrian origin, actually talks to Alex Collier, also informing him that he was one of them, but he died in one of the wars here, and that's why he had to be reincarnated here over and over again, because that's the law. Where you die, you will be reincarnated. That's just how it is. And the whole attempt to try and give him information and what they have read in the Akashic records, what they have read of the planetary grid and the information systems there, what they have a background information. I think that is also worth putting into this context, as well as some of the other work, the early work of Alex Collier, not the later ones, but in the work he made in the 90s, the Giza complex and some of the ideas he came up with there. So I think that should be put in as to be looked upon as well when we're doing this material. And always remember that the Bailey material was written 100 years ago. And what are the implications of that? For me, it's important. If it was written now, it would just be kind of, but it was written 100 years ago. And there's another thing that I'm also beginning to tap into is the whole kind of, when we read some of the laws that are put in Cosmic Fire, for instance, there's the law of attraction. What has that been turned into? And the whole manipulation of this material and what it gave grounds for. You can say the entire New Age that is founded on the understanding of extraterrestrial life forms begins with the Bailey material. But the ones that studied the Bailey materials in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, not until the 80s was it beginning to dawn on groups of people that this is actually what was talked about. It was because it was called the planetary hierarchy, with a hierarchy of souls, as we saw it in the Michael Newton books. This is my assessment. I'm not saying it is that way, but this is my assessment, is that people did not see them as extraterrestrials in organic vessels, but they saw them as souls floating around. And I don't know what people actually thought at the time, but they did definitely not address it in a scientific, critical manner that would take it up and review it and use a little bit of reductionism and try to tear it apart and look into the pieces and say, what is this actually about? And pull it out the whole. This is where when you read the Bailey material, you have to get rid of the word spirit. You have to get rid of the word divine. You have to get rid of the word God, and just look at it from a complete understanding of reality we have now when we talk about, well, a planetary logos is technically a human of the humanoid species or of the true human species that have developed into the ability to have an influential sphere that is strong enough to organize and rearrange through different developmental programs and the original constructions of solar systems to be the boss of an entire planet. So that's what that is, no more, no less. And humans are part of different human projects that are to be administered by this boss and the different co-workers he has in the different departments from where he's running this business we call Earth. And I have cleared out, some of you remember years ago I made this video called The Business Called Earth, and I kind of, the company called Earth, and I kind of taking that one out because that's I'm working with that idea, and that is technically what it is, and that's why the great Syrian can incarnate within business systems or whatever he chooses to. So what has he got going here on our planet? Again, I'm just put it in a different context and then work with the ideas from that context and contemplate upon it, pull it out of the divinity realm and put it down to earth so that you can look upon it from a logical, rational perspective and then begin asking the right questions. Because as long as you're doing it in an emotional, astral driven sphere of understanding, you will not get to the mental processes that will actually begin to explain you what you need to know about reality. Thank you.